There are stories that are born quietly, without warning, without intention, growing silently inside a human heart until one day they change the entire direction of a life. This story begins in a narrow street of a crowded city, where a young boy lived with nothing to his name except dreams he never shared and emotions he didn't know how to carry. His clothes were simple, his shoes worn out, and his pockets empty, but his heart had a softness that made him different from everyone around him. He worked long hours at a small shop, earning barely enough to survive, yet every evening he would step outside and look at the world with hope, as if he believed something extraordinary might happen to him someday. And then, one day, something did. He saw her, a girl unlike anyone he had ever seen. She stepped out of a luxury car, surrounded by elegance, confidence, and a life that seemed too perfect to be real. Her movements were graceful, her eyes sharp, her smile rare but mesmerizing. She didn't just walk, she floated through the world as if she owned every corner of it. Her clothes were designer, her perfume expensive, and her attitude higher than the sky itself. The moment he saw her, his heart forgot how to beat properly. He felt something he had never felt before, an emotion so deep and powerful that it scared him. He didn't know her name, but he knew her presence had just changed something inside him forever. He tried to ignore it, tried to silence his heart, but every day he found himself waiting to see her again. And whenever she appeared, even from far away, the world around him disappeared for a moment. He was poor, she was rich, he lived invisible, she lived untouchable. And yet, love does not understand these differences. It grows where it wants, blooms where it chooses, and destroys without permission. Days turned into weeks, and the boy's feelings only grew stronger until the weight became too heavy to hold inside. One afternoon, his heart overpowered his fear. He gathered every bit of courage he had and stepped in front of her, not with confidence, not with expectation, but with sincerity trembling in his voice. He didn't ask for her hand. He didn't ask for a future. He only said what his heart had been screaming for weeks. But she looked at him the way someone looks at dust. Her expression froze. Her eyes filled with irritation. And then she spoke words that burned through him like fire. "You don't have the status to even talk to me. Know your place." He froze. His breath stopped. His heart fell somewhere deep inside his chest where he could no longer reach it. She walked away without a second thought, leaving him standing there like a broken shadow. That evening, he didn't go home. He wandered. He walked through empty streets with a storm inside him. Her words echoed in his head again and again until they crushed him completely. He tried to eat but couldn't. He tried to sleep but failed. Every prayer he made felt hollow. He sat in mosques staring at the floor, unable to focus. He became lost in a pain that consumed him. Days passed, and he started losing himself. His eyes grew empty, his face pale, his steps unstable. People saw him roaming the streets like a forgotten soul, whispering to himself, replaying conversations that never happened. The world called him crazy, but he wasn't crazy, he was heartbroken in a way that destroyed his sense of self. One evening, as he sat near an abandoned building, staring at nothing, an old man noticed him. The old man was wise, the kind of person who could read emotions like open books. He walked slowly toward the boy and sat beside him without asking permission. For a few moments, he said nothing. Silence filled the space between them, heavy but comforting. Then the old man spoke. "Son, this world does not stop for anyone. You will destroy yourself for a girl who doesn't value the tears you shed. Love is not your enemy, your thoughts are. If you lose yourself like this, life will pass you by, and you will have nothing left. Stand up, work hard, become someone the world cannot ignore. One day, this same girl will wish she could talk to you. Success changes everything. Madness changes nothing." The boy listened quietly. At first, the words felt impossible. How could he stand up when he couldn't even breathe properly? But something in the old man's voice planted a seed in his heart, a seed of strength he didn't know he had. That night, he cried like he had never cried before. And when he wiped his tears, he felt something new inside him. Not confidence, not pride, but determination. He made a promise to himself. He would rise, he would work, he would become more than anyone expected. Not for the girl, not for revenge, but for his own dignity. The next morning, he began his journey. He took small steps at first. Long shifts turned into double shifts. He saved every penny. He learned new skills late at night, reading borrowed books, watching tutorials, practicing until his fingers hurt. He failed almost every day, but he didn't give up. The old man's words echoed inside him like a guiding light. Months passed, then years. The boy who once wandered the streets broken now walked with purpose. The world that once ignored him began to notice his determination. He started a small business. It failed. He started again, failed again, but each failure made him stronger, sharper, wiser. Slowly, his luck changed. His ideas grew. His income grew. His confidence grew. One day, he wasn't a poor boy anymore. One day, he wasn't invisible anymore. One day, he wasn't broken anymore. He had become a man who built an empire from nothing. A businessman respected by thousands. A leader people admired. A name that carried weight. A symbol of what a person can become when pain turns into power. And then destiny came full circle. He was walking through his office one afternoon when he saw a familiar face among the employees. A face he once loved with every piece of his soul. A face that once shattered him with a single sentence. It was her, but she was not the same. She had no luxury now. No pride. No shine. Life had humbled her. She worked as a low-level employee in his company, tired, stressed, and nothing like the girl who once stood above the world. She looked at him with eyes that widened in shock and then lowered in shame. 1,000 emotions passed through her face: surprise, regret, embarrassment. She remembered everything. She remembered every word she had said. But he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence carried 1,000 victories. His success carried 1,000 answers. He simply nodded and walked away. And in that moment, she understood the truth he had learned long ago. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't destroy you. It transforms you. Sometimes rejection is the beginning of destiny, not the end of it. He walked away from her that day without looking back, not because he wanted to hurt her, and not because pride demanded it. He walked away because life had already answered every question, every insult, and every wound she once gave him. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need to prove anything. His existence, his transformation, was proof enough. But as he moved through the hallways of his company, surrounded by respect and admiration from employees who saw him as a symbol of success, a strange emotion rose in his heart. Not love, not longing, not even resentment, just a quiet disbelief. He had lived so long inside the shadow of her rejection that seeing her again felt unreal. She looked so small now. So ordinary, so far removed from the pedestal he once placed her on. For a moment, he wondered how different life might have been if he had stayed broken, if that old man had never stopped beside him, if he had never gathered the strength to stand up. But then he realized something important: he hadn't risen to impress her. He had risen to rescue himself. Days passed, weeks. He became busier than ever. His company was expanding, new branches opening, new investors joining. Meetings, presentations, long hours, bigger decisions. The world he lived in now was enormous compared to the narrow street he once wandered heartbroken. But life, in its strange way, wasn't done weaving the threads of fate. The girl, now just another employee, began showing up in places he didn't expect. Not intentionally, but because the world inside his company was large yet interconnected. Sometimes he would see her standing in line at the cafeteria, her hands trembling slightly as she carried her tray. Sometimes he saw her cleaning her desk late at night when most employees had already gone home. Sometimes he noticed her sitting alone during lunch breaks, staring at the floor with a look in her eyes he couldn't recognize. It wasn't pride. It wasn't ego. It was regret. Life had humbled her in ways he never imagined. Her father's business had collapsed. Debts had drowned their family. Their wealth, reputation, status, everything vanished like smoke. And in her struggle, she applied to dozens of jobs, accepted rejections silently, until one day she was hired by his company, without knowing it belonged to him. He didn't know these details yet, but he could feel the quiet sadness around her, like a shadow she couldn't escape. One afternoon, during a meeting, he found himself staring out of the window, lost in thought. He wondered what she must have felt when she first saw him. The boy she once dismissed as worthless now owned a building where she had to ask permission even to enter certain floors. But even in that thought, he felt no satisfaction. Success had changed him too much for that. He no longer needed her recognition. He no longer needed her apology. Life had healed him far beyond the point where her opinion mattered. But fate wasn't finished. One evening, as he was leaving his office late at night, he heard soft crying echoing from the stairwell. He stopped. The sound was faint but unmistakable, quiet, broken, desperate. He stepped closer, and there she was, sitting on the last step with her hands covering her face, shaking with silent sobs. For a moment, he froze. Not because he felt pity. Not because he felt love. But because he didn't expect to see the same kind of pain he once carried inside himself reflected in someone who once caused it. She didn't notice him at first. But when she lifted her head, her eyes widened. She quickly tried to wipe her tears, embarrassed, ashamed, unable to meet his gaze. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know anyone was here. I'll leave. He shook his head slightly. You don't have to go. She lowered her eyes again. Silence filled the space, heavy and uncomfortable. He waited, but she couldn't speak. Finally, he asked gently, "Are you okay?" The question was simple, but it broke whatever strength she had been holding onto. More tears fell, and she whispered, "No, nothing is okay." He felt something shift inside him, not love, not sympathy, just a human softness. He sat at a distance, giving her space, letting her feel safe enough to breathe. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with trembling hands, she finally spoke. "My life fell apart," she said. "My family lost everything. I lost everything. I've been trying so hard to survive, but I feel like I'm losing myself." He didn't say anything, because sometimes silence is more comforting than words. She looked up at him with eyes full of guilt. "I know what I said to you, years ago. I remember every word. I've wanted to apologize, but I didn't know how to face you." He looked at her calmly. Her apology didn't shake him. It didn't heal anything because he no longer had wounds. Time, struggle, and success had already healed him. "You don't need to apologize," he said quietly. "Life teaches all of us in different ways." The moment he said it, she broke down again, not from pain, but from relief. For the first time in years, she felt forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because he had outgrown the version of himself she once hurt. She whispered, "How did you become so strong?" He didn't smile, but a faint warmth touched his expression. "Because someone once told me that destroying yourself for love is not love. It's surrender. And I refused to stay broken." She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a boy she once rejected. Not as a boss she feared. But as a man who had risen far beyond her imagination. At that moment, she realized something painful but true. She had lost him long before she even knew she needed him. He stood up. "Go home. Rest. Tomorrow will be better." She nodded slowly, unable to speak. As he walked away, he didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel revenge. He just felt a quiet acceptance of the strange ways life brings people back, changed, humbled, healed. He walked to his car, looking at the city lights glowing in the dark. He had climbed mountains she never knew existed. He had built his future with hands that once trembled in heartbreak. And now, looking at the world around him, he understood something profound.